Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the new lightweight one-person hot tent teepee shelter coming from Pomoly. So let's open up the stuff sack, get everything laid out on the table, see what comes with the tent, and then we're going to set up the tent in a number of different configurations. Okay, so starting on the outside, the stuff sack is a single zip, meaning it's a top load stuff sack. It does have two buckles that are compressible, so you can compress this down very small. And the tent actually packs down a lot smaller if you are packing it in, you're hiking or backpacking without the stuff sack. So if you were to jam this in your backpack, it really does compress down quite small. So just unzipping this, I'm going to lay everything out on the table. And I have used this a number of times in many different weather configurations, so things are a little bit messy right now, but ultimately we have the outer tent. I'm going to set that down there. We have the inner tent. We have the hood, which goes on the top, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. We have a bag full of pegs, so these are aluminum J stakes, and they're kind of an octagonal shape. So these are your standard aluminum octagonal. Very nice, very lightweight. If you do wish to upgrade these, you can, but I've actually been finding these to work very, very well with this tent. Terrain dependent, of course. We then have a bag with a center pull, so I might as well pull this out. It is an aluminum center pull, and pop this out of here. This material is very durable and makes for really great stuff sacks. So it's a very, it's basically a standard center pull that you find in most lightweight teepees. It's a 4-section piece bound with shock cord, so that does come with the tent, of course. And then we have a stove jack inside of this plastic bag. There's no hole cut into it, so that leaves it open to the user. Me personally, I like cutting an X pattern inside of my stove jacks. You can cut a round circle if you wish, but it does come with the stove jack. I just want to kind of let you guys know that. And then it does come with a whole bunch of guy lines. This has 2 extra guy lines here, and the rest I've already fixed onto the outer tent. That is everything in the kit. So I'm going to take the center pole, the pegs, the hood, and the outer tent, and we're going to set this up in a non-mesh inner configuration. We're going to have a look at it, walk around the tent a little bit, talk about some of the features, and then I'm going to mix up the configuration with the mesh inner, and then we'll take it from there. Okay guys, so I have the outer tent laid down on the ground. I do have a couple of tent pegs in my pocket, and I've got the center pole. That is all you need to set the tent up. But I am going to walk you guys through some of the setup because these tents can be tricky for a lot of people to set up. Once you get a little bit of practice setting up non-freestanding tents, it's very, very simple, but I will show you guys how to set this up very easily. What I like to do is just simply lay it out on the ground. It doesn't have to be perfect circle or anything. And I like taking some of the pegs, and you want to find the corners. They all have adjusters on them. You want to find the corners and just guide them out one at a time, nice and loosely. It doesn't need to be tight because this tent does have adjusters on the bottom, so we could dial in the tightness a little later on after we get the center pole put in there and the tent standing. Then we'll work on some of the angles and getting it nice and straight. So simply take your pegs, put them in the little cordage, pop them in the ground. And I like going all the way around the tent and getting a peg in each corner, whether it's tight or not. At least there's one there, and then like I said, we can work on tightening it up a little later on. Alright, so now that I have 6 pegs in the tent holding it down on the ground, the wind's not going to blow it around anywheres. I then come over to one of the 2 doors on this tent. It is a double entry tent. And simply unzip, and then I go inside of the tent with the pole and just simply stand it up, and then we'll zip it back closed, and then we'll go all the way around the tent, adding in the extra pegs because there are guy out points in between the main stakeouts, and everything has an adjuster. So it makes this tent extremely strong and extremely easy to set up once you get it standing. So this is the standing phase. Simply put the center pole in there. It's going to be loose and floppy. Don't worry about that. We'll zip it shut. And now I like going around the tent and just giving these a little snug pull. And like I said, there are guy outs in between the main guy outs. So for example, right here, we have a secondary guy out. I'm gonna put a peg in that, and I'm just gonna pull it snug, really, really loosely, go all the way around the tent, and then check the final shape and make sure I'm happy with it. All right guys, so here I've got the tent set up. I've got all the pegs in the ground. I do not have the guy line staked out yet though, or the top cap put on. I have left this central guy out open because this is the door panel that I'm going to be opening to show you guys the inside of the tent. I just want to cover a couple of specs. The tent is 5.3 pounds. It is 63 inches tall and it has a max span, so a diameter of 110 inches, making this ample enough room for one person, even two people without the mesh inner, but certainly one person with the mesh inner. So all around the tent, everything has adjusters. They all have these little cord adjusters, so you can simply place your peg into the ground, which is what I'm going to do with these guy out points right now. And basically these guy lines, you can adjust it to hold the tent nice and sturdy. They have plastic adjusters on the ends, like I was saying, making this extremely easy to set up. So we do have some cord lock style there. You can guide this out, hold it nice and firm, and that allows you to open one door or two door panels. And with this central guy out point in between the main pegs, means you can even open a half door panel versus having to open the entire door panel in bad weather. So I'm going to guy all these guy lines out, and then we're going to talk about the top cap over at the picnic table again, because there is a very important detail that I want to cover when you first put that on. So I'm going to finish getting this set up and then we'll head back over to the table. Okay guys, so back over here at the picnic table, I just want to cover a very important detail that has to do with this rain hood. So this hood goes on top of the tent and it basically sits on top of the center pole, and then it has all these shock cords with plastic hooks that hook into the tent. What this allows you to do is actually open up the top of the tent. So if the weather's not bad, you can open it up partially, you can open it up a lot, or you can take the whole thing off and allow a lot of fresh air both to come in and a lot of heat to go out of the tent if you find it too hot. It's just nice to have a little bit of extra ambient light in there and whatnot. But there is one important thing. So when you receive the tent, this will come packed like this. And I apologize, these bugs today are driving me crazy. It will be packed like this with the seam tape on the outside. So when you first get this, there's going to be a little pocket on the inside, and you're automatically going to think that the center pole goes in that pocket and then these wrap around. That's what I thought. That's actually incorrect, because that will leave the seam tape on the outside of the tent and it won't be fully sealed up. So what you want to do is put your hand inside of that, just like I have my hand in right now. Pinch the very top and then turn it inside out like a sock, okay? And basically what you're going to end up with is this little hood section. All the seam taping is now on the inside, and then you have a nice little rain flap here where the center pole goes up inside, and then these overlap around the outside. So that's one important detail. Make sure you turn this inside out, otherwise it won't function properly. So let's go get this on the tent. All right, so coming back over to the tent, I've got the hood inverted as it's supposed to be. We've got our webbing all kind of situated up here. We've got our nice protective cap up here. The tent is guyed out. It is nice and tight. So what you want to do is just toss this over top, making sure all of your hooks are not tangled up, because sometimes these do get tangled. It can be a little bit frustrating, but it's often very easy to untangle. So everything's untangled. Simply put your center pole in that little pocket right up at the top. And what I like to do is I like to have the seam going with my working door. So this tent does have two doors, whichever one you choose to be your primary in and out door. It doesn't really matter where you point this. I just like having it over the door, so if I do want to release it, I can unzip the door, reach up, undo one of these hooks, and then open up the top cap. But essentially what you want to do is overlap these little wings and run your shock cord into these webbing loops, so that there are webbing loops in here. Everything corresponds. It's going to look a little wonky while you're setting it up. It'll make more sense once you're totally set up. So I can see right now that's open. So I'm actually going to pull this cord over here, and I'm going to run this probably down here. And once you play around with the hooks and you go all the way around the tent, it will shrink down on the top of the cap, making a very nice water seal. I've never had one of these leak in all the Pomoly TP tents run this system, At first I was skeptical, but after using them for a number of, probably over 2 years now, I have a lot of experience with Pomoly tents. I've never had a top cap leak on me ever in the rain or snow, even in high winds. So once you get this figured out, it will work amazingly. So I'm going to go all the way around, and I'm basically just going to tighten all of these hooks up, making sure I've got them all tightened up, making sure that's overlapped, and that's basically how you set up the entire outer tent. We're going to move inside after I get this straightened out, just to talk about some of the features and the stove jack area, of course, and then we're going to get the mesh inner in here. Okay, so now that we've got the top cap installed, I did roll one door back with the toggle. There is a toggle on the other door as well, so this entire panel opens up if you wish to have it open. I want to point out one thing. The stove jack is just over my shoulder, so it's right here on this panel. So in this kind of configuration, if you were running a mesh inner, you would put it on this side and not this side, because this is the wood stove side. That would be the sleeping side. So you would effectively split the tent down the middle, and you would do that right at the zipper. So it pegs into the zipper peg, right where your little guy line is. You would hook on the mesh inner there, and you would cut the tent directly in half right over to the next zipper. And that basically gives you one wood stove side and then one sleeping side with the mesh inner. Of course, if you're not running the mesh inner and you're just sleeping on the ground with maybe a ground sheet and you do have the stove, then you can position your ground sheet wherever you like. There are 2 doors in this tent, as I mentioned previously, so just keep that in mind for where you put your sleeping bag and your setup. If you do not have a mesh inner or a wood stove in here, you can definitely easily fit 2 people plus a little bit of gear inside of here. There are a lot of different options for setup, but this, I just wanted to show this with one door open, the other door shut, and of course the door in behind me totally shut, both panels. So hopefully this gives you guys an idea. I am kneeling. I can kind of get my head out the doorway. I can see a lot of stuff, and it is a very nice tent. The color of this green is very, very nice in the forest. It blends in really well. And we'll talk more about the specs when we do get back over to the tabletop on what fabric it is and dive a little bit more into the specs. But let's get the mesh inner in here and let's see how that sets up and how it looks. All right, so here I have the mesh inner tent, and I just want to cover that there is an adjustable buckle at the very top of the mesh inner. This does correspond with another buckle placed at the top of the teepee. When you set this up, it's ideal to leave this extremely loose. So loosen that off all the way, and that'll help you get all these angles correct on the tent. And then the final setup, when you're completely staked in, then you want to kind of tighten that up, and that'll lift the walls of the mesh inner, giving you its full form. So what I'm going to do for this setup today is I am going to split the tent down the middle going with the doors. So like I said, the stove jack is over here. We're going to have that area open, and the back area is all going to be mesh inner. So what I like to do, spin this all the way around, making sure that your zipper is in the front, and basically take your outermost corner. There are shock cords on here. You want to hook it to the shock cord and not to the actual webbing. We're going to run that shock cord to the zipper peg, so right where that tent peg is on the zipper on this side, and then I'm going to go to the other side of the tent and attach the shock cord to that peg. And then we're going to attach the other shock cords. There are 2 more in the rear that need to hook on the outside of the tent. That'll give us 4 points of attachment to the ground. We're then going to click in our buckle, and then we're going to cinch it up nice and tight, and that'll give the full form to the mesh inner. Okay, so coming over to the other side of the tent, I just want to open up both panels to give you guys a look through. I've got my 4 corners to my mesh inner staked out. Now the last thing that we need to do is hook up our buckle. Very simple. The female end is up at the top, along with a plastic hook as well. So if you do have a lantern or a light that you want to hook on up there, you can do so. It is outside of the mesh inner. There is also a hook built inside of the mesh inner. So if you want to hang something from inside of the mesh inner while you're in there sleeping, you can do so for a reading lamp or whatever you find that that hook is useful for. So I'm going to attach that buckle. Like I said, all the points are staked out. Simply tighten that up, and then you can work out some of your angles. So I know right now that one needs to go this way just a tiny little bit, just to tighten up this area. Now keep in mind it is still blowing in the wind as well, so that will make it move a tiny bit. But once you get a sleeping pad in there and it's actually pushed down on the ground, you can see how that tightens up nicely. It is a very, very nice sleeping area with a ton of room inside. There are 2 pockets, one on this end, one on that end, if you do want to slip some car keys or a cell phone inside of there. I personally don't use those pockets. I find there's ample enough room inside of the half mesh inner, especially on the far back side behind your sleeping pad, to put your backpack, a jacket, a sweater, keys, whatever you need to basically store back there. You can do that, and then all of your other items you can store outside. So a canister stove, if you do have the wood stove would be positioned right here because the stove jack is directly above, giving you a ton of room. So I'm going to close this whole side up. We're going to move back over to the other side, have a look at the stove jack first, and then just kind of give you guys a real quick look on the outside of the tent. And then we're going to tear the outer tent down, and I'm going to show you the mesh inner setup by itself, how you can do that for a lightweight shelter away from the bugs underneath of a tarp. Okay, so before we move into the inside of the tent and kind of showing you guys the mesh inner without the outer tent, I do want to touch on the stove jack. So this is a standard stove jack. Like I said, there's no hole cut into it. You can cut an X depending on the diameter of your pipe, like I like to. You can cut a circle, whatever you like to do. There's both male and female portion of the Velcro on both sides. So let's just get this out of the way real quick, and I just want to show you this roll-up door. There is a toggle at the top, and there is an ample amount, I want to say there's probably about 2 to 2.5 inches of roll space in between where the jack is going to be. That's very important for when running a stove, that the stovepipe doesn't touch the outer fabric. So you'll see what I mean there. We've got about 2.5 inches of clearance from the Velcro to where this is going to roll up. Simply roll this up and toggle in your little door here. There are reflective kind of silver markings on all of the guy lines, I will mention that. So this is reflective. All the guy out lines and all the guy out points are highly visible at nighttime, making your tent very visible and easy to spot. You then take the simple stove jack here, and doing this the first time can be a little bit tricky. Just make sure you're oriented the correct way. And you just want to spread the fabric out, placing that in there. Once you get it all placed on there properly, you'll see that it does create a nice rigid stove jack area. Now keep in mind, I do have a door open on the tent, so if I were to shut the door, it would pull this nice and tight just like that, giving you a nice area for your stovepipe to come out of the tent and exit in a safe manner. So right here you guys can see the stove jack that I just placed on there, and you can kind of get the idea of what I was saying with the panel going loose. If I push in on this, it will go loose, but if I pull out on it, it goes tight. So typically what I would do with my tents, especially in the winter time, I wouldn't open this panel all the way. I would put the center guy out, the peg in the ground, and basically this door would open a little bit, or I would open up the other door and as well as on the other side. I wouldn't necessarily open this whole panel wide. On a day like today, it's not terrible because it's not very windy, but if it were very windy, you could get a little bit of motion going on here, just like with any other tent. So just keep that in mind, that when you do have the door open, rolled up on the stove side, just keep a very close eye on it, but it does work very well. Now I chose to show you guys a new stove jack today. I do have another stove jack that has been used. I just wanted to show you guys the actual jack in its new form so you guys can get the idea of how to cut the hole, where to place it, and how that'll work out for you guys. Okay guys, now that I've got the entire outer tent completely taken down, we're left with just the inner mesh. I've got 4 pegs in the mesh inner securing it to the ground. I do have a trekking pole. I have 1 additional peg, and then I have some guy out material. This is just standard 1.8 millimeter paracord with a carabiner on the other end. And what I've done is I've just clicked on to the top of that buckle that's already attached on the mesh inner with my carabiner. There are 2 options to setting this up. One, you can put the trekking pole inside of the mesh inner, or you can run it outside. Today I'm going to put the trekking pole inside of the mesh inner. So I've got the handle down towards the bottom. I've got my pointy end, which would go on the ground when you're walking. I'm going to put that up towards. The top of this mesh inner is reinforced enough to hold the load of this. So this is really important to make sure your mesh inner actually has a cap on top to basically sit on top of your trekking pole without getting damaged. And by utilizing your mesh inner with your hot tent as a summer tent, you're getting a lot of bang for your buck. So I think this is a really, really great option to be able to use this as a bug net, because currently I'm being swarmed with bugs right now, and I think this is just a really, really great way to utilize your gear instead of just waiting till winter time or fall to use it with your hot tent. So this is a great way to use it during the summer. I'm going to zip this shut. Already right there you can see we have a standing bug net. You can move the trekking pole over towards the door, of course, and then you simply take this line, guy it out, put your peg in the ground, and you've got a mesh inner tent. So you guys can see that this is my sleeping area. I've got all of this room behind me that is completely open for a backpack or other camping gear. Essentially, I'd be sleeping right here, taking up this room, and all of this is totally open. Now, if you did have a tarp over top, a nice A-frame tarp, or maybe a plow point tarp, any configuration tarp you wanted to do, this would keep you bug-free and give you a nice sleep during the warmer months when the black flies, mosquitoes, wood ticks, snakes, even spiders. This will protect you from all those creepy crawlies, and then your tarp on the outside would protect you from the elements. Okay guys, so that is the new lightweight tent coming from Pomoly. It is either a hot tent or a summer use tent. We've got all the components here other than the mesh inner is still set up. But I do want to cover some of the specs just before it does start raining here today. I have the listing pulled up on my phone. So it does have a top vent, which we've covered. It is 5.3 pounds, and that is 2.4 kilograms. It is 4-season. The color is an iron cyan, so kind of a nice greenish, kind of an iron color green. It's very, very nice. I actually like it. It's a nice durable fabric. The fabric is 40 denier, silicone treated. The waterproof rating is 2,000 millimeter heat seam waterproofed seam tape. So we already touched on the seam taping on the seams. There are 2 doors, no snow skirts, and that's actually really important because it's nice to have ventilation come in your tent. And when you have a wood stove in there, there is no shortage of heat. Trust me, it gets very warm. The capacity is 1 person with the mesh inner, but as I've touched on, you can fit 2 people in there with no mesh inner. It is totally up to you. And the measurements from corner to corner are 79 inches. But like I said, the overall circumference is 110 inches and 63 inches tall from the ground to the peak. And the current pricing is available on Pomoly.com. I don't like touching on pricing because things change. Pricings may go up and down, and there may be sales that happen and the price be reduced. So that is the new lightweight hot tent coming from Pomoly. If you guys have any questions, drop it down in the comment section. And if you guys need any in-depth specs, more that I did not touch on, head on over to Pomoly.com. I'll put the link in the description so you guys can navigate your way there easily. And that is all I got with this tent. So thanks for watching. Peace out, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.